Police officers of Reddit, what's the craziest situation you've been in? Story 1. Definitely the time that an older, mentally ill woman tried to burn her house down because she believed that was the only way to disarm the atom bomb in her attic. I got her to walk with me to my car and get in the back by telling her it was the only place she'd be safe. When I got in and we started driving, she started yelling at me that I couldn't take her to jail because she hadn't done anything wrong. I calmly informed her that we were going to the hospital, which prompted even louder yelling of, "I'm not crazy!" I replied, "I don't think you're crazy." She screamed, "Then why are you taking me to the hospital?" I told her, "Well, you were next to an atom bomb, right? We gotta get you checked for radiation poisoning." Her eyes got wide and she said, "Oh my goodness, I didn't even think about that, you better hurry." Story 2. Attended a structural fire in a downtown high-rise. Was tasked with evacuating local residents in case the building collapsed. Third house I went to, the guy answers in a full bunny suit, with a gas mask propped up on his head. English wasn't his first language, and as I was trying to communicate that he needed to evacuate, it became clear that he was running a speed lab inside. I basically arrested the Asian Walter White, and then had to sit in the shadow of the structure fire, keeping eyes on the house while waiting for the clear team to show up. In that time, fire trucks basically surrounded my vehicle, so I couldn't move it, even after clear moved in. Walter had his lawyer call in my superior, and it was about 10 hours before we could head back to the cells. I never had to piss so badly in my life. Story 3. Responded with my partner to a welfare check on an elderly gentleman, knocked on the door, walked in, and couldn't find him. So we went to his garage and found him sound asleep behind the wheel. He tried to go out through carbon monoxide poisoning. Thing is, though, he only had a small amount of fuel in it, and it was a new Civic that could never hope to belch out enough smoke to do anything with that little gas in the tank. He was pissed when he woke up that I wasn't St. Peter. I mean, either way that guy wouldn't have seen St. Peter, because if you go out by your own hand in Christianity, that's an automatic ticket straight down. Story 4. Dad tells me the story of a guy he knew who kept getting caught for writing bad checks. He was such a big guy that he wouldn't fit in the police car, so they would often just meet him at the magistrate's office and write him tickets there. But a year or so after this kept happening, my dad got a call that there was a domestic dispute at this guy's house. So him and his partner rush over there, and he's got an axe in his hand, sitting on the front porch, all bloody when they arrive. They approach and tell him to put the axe down, which he does, and he proceeds to tell them that his wife is in the bathtub, or at least her head is. But the guy was completely open and cooperative, didn't run or anything. Asked if he could meet them at the magistrate office, and Dad was like, "Yeah, nah man, you're gonna have to get in the car this time." Apparently there was a disagreement about finances, and he just snapped. He was calm and just sitting on the porch when they showed up, and it actually turned out that he was the one who called it in. Story 5. Showed up to a call about a baby crying non-stop for hours, and no sign of an adult being home. We went into the house, and I followed the sound of this crying baby upstairs to find an 18-month-old with her arms duct-taped to her crib. I undid the duct tape, and it was obvious that this was not the first time it had happened. So I brought the child downstairs and outside, where the mom was walking up the sidewalk of the housing unit. She completely flipped on me. So I handed the baby off to a patrol and cuffed her. It was the most satisfying clicking of handcuffs that I've ever heard. This happened to me when I was in the army as an MP. The father of the child was deployed at the time. From what I heard, he was granted permission to return home and take custody of the kid. They got a divorce, and I believe he won custody. I don't really know what happened to her as far as sentencing or jail time, though, but I hope it was harsh. Story 6. Not a cop, but a cop friend of mine in Washington. He got a domestic disturbance call and arrived to a calm scene. The husband explained that he and his wife had been arguing, and that she'd gone over the top. But they were both fine now. The wife confirmed the story, but stated she didn't want the husband back in the house that night. So my friend asked if the husband had a place to go, and he agreed to go to his mother's house for the night. So the husband left. Then my friend and his partner left soon after. About an hour later, they get a call back to the same house. When they get there, the husband is in the kitchen, dead. The wife explains that right after the police left, her husband came back and resumed arguing with her. He got in her face, and she stabbed him in the neck with a chicken bone, hitting his carotid artery. Story 7. While serving in South Korea, my team was on patrol in the local drinking village when we heard someone drunkenly singing the U.S. national anthem. At a loss for where this individual was, we finally decided looking upwards was the last place possible, and yep, sure enough, there he was, tightrope walking on the ledge of a building 3 stories up. This is when precision of language is of vital importance, especially when dealing with a drunk. Unfortunately, the sergeant on scene said, "Hey, come down here!" To which the drunkard replied, "On my way!" and proceeded to step off the building. Under the impression I was about to witness my first death on duty, I was in shock. Through some stroke of weird luck, this guy ended up glancing the hood of a Daewoo truck and slid down to the ground. We ran over to his severely injured body expecting something horrible to come out of his mouth, but all he said was, "Hey guys, how's it going?" This man had open fractures on both femurs, but thankfully, after some makeshift splinting and controlling the bleeding, we were able to get him transported to the nearest hospital. But God, soju is a hell of a thing. Story 8. I ain't a cop, but my dad is, and this happened when I was on a ride-along with him quite a few years ago. After eating our lunch, we went down to a runoff point so he could finish up some reports, which is what cops are usually doing when you see them parked on the side of the road somewhere that isn't directly connected to a main highway. I was on my phone watching some videos when he got a call in to check something that was happening up the road. I was sitting in the car the entire time this happened. We headed up the road to a construction site that had been active but non-progressing for about 5 years. When we got there, there were a bunch of people just standing around looking weird, dressed in weird suits and obvious fake construction costumes with fake hard hats. A representative of the construction company had called the police down when these people showed up and didn't say a single thing for hours. Backup arrived and about 6 cops were trying to get 24 people to just say anything. After a half hour passed, every single one of the trespassers began to dance and music began to blare from portable speakers. It went on until the song ended, at which point one of the dancers stood up and said, "Danielle, Kyle has an important question for you." Everyone was motionless until the person who stood up started looking around and asking if either of those people were even there. It took another 5 minutes before a threat of arresting people came to a head and got the speaker to finally begin talking about what was going on. Turns out, someone had hired a flash mob crew, which were pretty big back then, for a marriage proposal, but no one showed up. After all that was done, my dad found out that the person who hired the flash mob actually did so to rob a jewelry store up the road and assumed that a flash mob would draw all the police to the site, not having enough intelligence to realize that a flash mob trespassing on a mostly empty, machine-free construction yard wouldn't rank higher than an armed robbery of a jewelry store. Story 9. I just asked my dad, who's been a cop for more than 30 years. He told me he pulled over a car full of woodchucks being driven around by some old drunkard. This was in a rural area in the northeast of the US where getting guys for drunk driving was pretty common, and my dad was in his late 20s at the time, so in good shape compared to the drunks. I think there were 4 woodchucks in this guy's car, he said. So while my dad was processing the driver, he had him in the front seat of his car. Once the guy realized that he was probably going to be arrested, he started ripping the radio and anything he could grab out of my dad's car. Then he actually grabbed my dad and pulled him out through the passenger side of the vehicle onto the ground. My dad landed between this guy's legs and into some kind of leg-lock chokehold. The guy during all this started to scream at his friends to grab his gun. Once he has my dad in a full leg lock, he looks down and says, "Now I'm gonna kill you," before he starts to choke my dad with his legs. I guess backup came just in time, because the deputy came around and hit him in the head with a baton and sent this drunk psycho out. Story 10. My first day on the job with a small department, I get an animal complaint at a house along the river. The caller states that there are some angry geese in her yard that won't let her out her door. My FTO, field training officer, and I roll up. Sure enough, a gaggle of 8 big angry geese are in the yard, barricading this little old lady in her house. We try to make noise and scatter them, and they have no fear and actually go on the offensive. We retreat to take cover behind the squad car as we formulate a plan. We decide that we'll use the dog control poles, which we normally use to wrangle loose dogs, to try and catch the geese while keeping them at a safe distance from us. The FTO gives me the brand new pole that has yet to be used. So him and I both grab our poles and head back into battle. I get close to one and it takes off running. I follow it in hot pursuit. I get within reach and make a diving leap with the pole and somehow manage to get the noose around its neck and pull it tight. As my body crashes to the ground, the pole falls free of my grasp, and I watch in shock as that damn goose runs into the river, dragging the brand new pole behind it. I figured the goose would slip the noose once in the water and the pole would go to the bottom of the river. Great. Now the chief's gonna be pissed that I lost a brand new pole in the river. Well, the next day we got a call from a bus driver reporting kids on the bus were upset that they could see a dead goose as they crossed the bridge, and it appeared that someone had strangled it with some kind of pole. Oh, Sure enough, that damn goose from the day before never shook the noose and managed to get the pole stuck on a piece of driftwood, pulled the noose tight, and strangled itself right in view of the school kids heading over the bridge on that bus. My FTO and I headed over to the boat launch and commandeered a pontoon boat, headed to the dead goose, and plucked it from the river. The boater was not quite sure what to think of the whole ordeal, but we all ended up having a good laugh about it, and I got our new animal control pole back. Although I never quite lived that down. Story 11. Not an officer, but my dad was. He told me a story about a time where he actually experienced a suspect die on him mid-pursuit. He said he was chasing down this one white kid, who he suspected of being high as fuck because he was running as fast as a dog on a rat. This kid tried to climb a gate or something, and my dad caught up to him, grabbed him, and boom! Kid was dead in his arms. My dad, a black police officer in Florida, starts thinking, oh, crap, they're gonna say I killed this white boy. Come to find out, the guy had been high as hell. On blow, to the point of psychosis. As Dad grabbed him, his heart either exploded or gave out. Dad didn't get in trouble, but this all puts the Florida man crap into perspective. He also told me about how he slapped a crooked superior officer so bad that the guy flinched whenever he walked past him. My dad's dad saw this one day and said, "You was a mean officer, wasn't you?" To which Dad replied in his usual blood-knightedness, "Yes, sir." Story 12. A guy on a sports team I play in is a drug squad cop, and told us the following story. They'd staked out a speed lab house for a while and surveyed the house with pinhole cameras for some time. They noticed that the occupants were becoming increasingly erratic. Someone senior suggested that it might have been due to them not replacing the filters in their protective masks. Anyway, at some stage they decide it's time to go in, so tactical enter and grab all the guys and clear the rooms. Then a chemical team go in to make sure everything is safe. Eventually my mate and his team go in to collect evidence with a few young uniforms to help. The house is a bit of a shambles, but nothing too unexpected, frankly, until that is one of the uniforms picks up a large rubber intimate toy and starts playing around with it in front of everybody. The senior then tells him, "You know that while reviewing all the footage on this place, we never saw any women entering or leaving this house. And why are you the only one not wearing gloves?" Obviously, at that point he freaked out and damn near slung the thing across the room. Story 13. My dad was backing up a situation where a guy allegedly was shooting up on the street. When he came over, the guy was arguing with the officer on scene. Definitely not being aggressive in any way, or suspicious though. Long story short, the other two officers on scene did get aggressive with him and grabbed him, slammed him multiple times into a car parked on the street, and he had to get 67 stitches. My dad told the chief and ended up having to quit since everyone was pissed at him for doing so. God, that's so messed up. Civil servants aren't meant to be an old boys club. Story 14. I babysat for a cop, and he told me one story where he was called to this old lady's home. When they got there, they found her husband's rotting body under a pile of newspapers. So apparently the lady had really bad dementia and had thought the husband was a robber and hit him in the back of the head with a rolling pin. The poor dementia lady went back to bed, and her husband was dead in the morning. She didn't know what to do at that point, so she covered his body with newspapers and somehow managed to survive on her own for a few days. A neighbor started to worry and came to check up on them. The neighbor was the one that called the police. That story haunted me for, at least a month. Story 15. Not a police officer, but I know one. I'm sure he has a million stories, but my favorite that he's told me was of the time that he was called to a local Mexican restaurant. When he arrived, he was directed to a Cadillac in the parking lot that was a rockin', if you catch my drift. He knocks on the window, and a butt-ass naked 80-year-old woman gets out, pissed off that someone interrupted her getting laid. Her 80-something-year-old husband was laying naked in the vehicle still as well. This old woman stood outside of her vehicle, completely naked, for a solid 5 minutes, arguing with my friend about how she should be able to get laid wherever she wants. There was more to the story, of course, but as I'm not the first-hand storyteller, I can't really do the story the proper justice it deserves. He didn't arrest them, even though she stood naked outside for at least 5 minutes, so she got off easy. Pun intended. Now we hop into the rapid fire segment, although this one is less of a rapid fire and more of a short story segment, but let's hop right in. My partner and I once received a call about an escaped swan. Let me tell you, we definitely did not have any luck catching it. My mom has been a police officer for quite some time now, over 10 years I guess, and she had this habit of giving her personal phone number for emergencies. One time, some crazy woman called her telling her that she keeps seeing green orbs on the wall and that the government wants to expose her to radiation so the aliens could take her. My dad said he once took an aluminum baseball bat away from a guy hopped up on something. This guy was holding it so tightly, the metal was indented where his fingers were, and pieces of the pleather grip had to be removed by a doctor. A heavy drug-using couple believed that there was a demon inside the woman after a psychic reading told them so. They were getting down and dirty, and they both thought they could feel the demon inside her, which led to the man digging inside of her with his hand in order to evacuate said demon. Their neighbor called the cops, and their child let them in. My security officer buddy at Disneyland got attacked by a lemur during his lunch and tased it. He was fired, but given a 20 grand hush money payout. Not sure how true the story is, but this did happen in Florida, so I guess anything's possible. So that's it for today. Don't forget to subscribe if you enjoyed this video. My name is ReddList. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I will see you next time.
Nothing once again. Oh, tired of it, really.